need insurance to protect the assets of the PTA and the personal assets of its members. And we tell people this, they go, well, what do you mean we need to protect our personal assets? And we have to explain to them if they're having an event and someone gets, you know, severely injured and there's a lawsuit, well, the attorneys will not just name the PTA, but they'll also name everybody involved. So any volunteers, any members that are involved in that event. And if the event happens on school property, they're going to name the school district in the lawsuit too. So you just need to know that the insurance not only protects the assets of the PTA, but it'll also protect your personal assets. It'll protect the equity in your home, your 401k, savings, those kind of things. You need insurance because, you know, anyone can sue for any reason. They usually do. We have a very litigious society. We have a thing called frivolous lawsuits. And so it's, because of that, it's really important to have the insurance. PTAs are not immune from liability. We start talking to PTAs about needing general liability. They say, well, we're a nonprofit, we're a charitable organization, we've incorporated, so we don't need insurance, right? We're immune from liability. And we have to tell them that no, those things help, but they're still not immune from liability. The next one is one of the biggest fallacies, that is that a lot of PTAs tell us, well, the school insures us. We don't need insurance because we're covered on the school insurance. And what we find is typically school insurance does not cover PTA. So if your school is telling you that you're insured under their policy, sit down with the risk manager and go over a list of things that you do throughout the year. So if you have a carnival, don't just say you have a carnival, but list all the things in that carnival, like bounce houses and dunk tanks and pony rides and petting zoos and all those kind of things, and say, if someone gets injured in one of these activities, is the school going to protect us? And what we find is typically that the school will say, you know, no, you're not covered for these kind of things. And then the last reason you need insurance, or one of the biggest benefits, is if you're named in a lawsuit, regardless of how legit it is, whether it's a frivolous lawsuit or not, the insurance policy is going to step in and defend you. Okay. Your general liability policy costs about $100 a year annually, and we typically pay attorneys anywhere from $300 to $700 an hour. So $100 investment is a good investment to not have to pay $300 or $400 an hour for attorney fee. Next, I want to talk about the types of insurance you should consider. We basically have 4 policies that we offer PTAs: general liability, officer's liability, personal property insurance, and fidelity bond or crime insurance. And then the general liability has 2 endorsements that you can add to the general liability to add other coverage, like it's extended medical and media liability. So we're going to talk about each one of these separately. First of all, general liability. What does the general liability protect you from? It's really pretty simple. I mean, the policy is 50, 60 pages, and I don't understand some of it, but it's pretty simple. It just protects the PTAs from lawsuits resulting from bodily injury or property damage. So if you're having a carnival and kids are jumping around a bounce house and they get injured, that's bodily injury, so that's covered by the general liability. If you're having an event at the school and somehow while your event's going on, you damage school property, that's general liability. It's covered under the general liability policy. Who needs to be protected under general liability? This is a really important point. If you go to your local agent and buy general liability, more than likely they're going to insure the named insured. The named insured will be your PTA. The ABC PTA is going to be the named insured. But under the general liability, you really need to have all of your members, volunteers, and employees insured. As I said earlier, if there's a lawsuit, they're going to name everybody. So it's important you don't just have your PTA insured, but you have everybody insured. And that's what the AIM general liability policy does, is insures everybody. Policy limits, we suggest $1 million. We've been doing this for 30 years. Our largest liability claim was just over $600,000. So we feel very comfortable recommending that $1 million is adequate. We offer higher coverages limits if you think you need more sleep insurance. So just some of the activities that could cause you liability are things like roller skating, parties, graduation parties, swim parties, after prom parties, fun runs, book fairs, bounce houses, babysitting, and food sales. So these are all sorts of all things that your PTA might do that could cause you some liability. Next, I want to talk about one of the endorsements that you can purchase under the general liability, which is called extended medical payments. Okay, what kind of protection does this provide? It provides medical payments for injuries sustained at one of your PTA events. And how is it different from general liability? Well, the general liability, as we talked about, provides protection for lawsuits. The medical payments just provides for medical bills not involving the lawsuit. So, with regards of how the accident happened, regardless of the fault or the injury, the extended medical payments just step in and pay all the medical bills. And why is it important? Because it provides higher in your general liability. Your general liability comes with a $5,000 limit for medical bills, but the extended medical allows you to extend or buy higher limits of medical payments. And we find that if you have enough medical payments to pay for medical bills, then you usually can avoid a lawsuit. So what sort of policy limits should you consider? Well, every PTA is different. If you don't have fundraising events and all you do is get together with parents, teachers once a month for a meeting, you probably don't need this coverage. But if you're having carnivals and doing multiple fundraising events, you probably want to consider expanding or extending your med pay limits to $10,000, $25,000, or $50,000. Next, I want to talk about media liability, which is another endorsement, another coverage you can add to your general liability. The media liability, again, is a liability policy, so it's going to protect your PTA from lawsuits resulting from social media. So what sort of things might you do on social media that could cause you risk? Well, if you post photographs without getting a release, if you use trademarks or logos without permission, if you make a misrepresentation of information or make confidential information public on social media, these are all situations where it could cause your PTA liability. So just some examples of social media. Obviously, if you have a website, that's considered social media, but LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and others. So these are all social media outlets that you could be covered for. Next, let's talk about officers' liability insurance. And again, this is a liability policy, so it protects the officers from lawsuits from wrongful acts or inappropriate actions. So what sort of wrongful acts or inappropriate actions would the officers be covered for? Inappropriate use of organizational funds, misleading statements, negligent acts, discrimination, not following your bylaws, misrepresentation. So the officers of the organization are running the organization. They're making decisions every day. And so any sorts of decisions they make or actions they take, someone could take exception with and try to find fault with or cause the officers to have liability. Personal property insurance. What does this policy protect? It protects the personal property of the PTA from damage due to an accident, theft, or natural disaster. So there's a list here of the types of personal property that PTAs typically own. A lot of PTAs will tell us when we talk to them about property insurance, they don't own any property like popcorn machines or snow cone machines or anything like that. But first thing we ask them is, do you purchase fundraising merchandise? And most PTAs will say, yes, we do purchase fundraising merchandise. And so that's a perfect example of something that, when they take possession of the fundraising merchandise till the time they sell it or distribute it, it's in their possession. And so they're responsible for that. And if something happens to it, the property policy would cover it. And the last coverage I want to talk about is fidelity bond. And the fidelity bond, it protects your cash and your money against embezzlement, robbery, or theft. And who should be covered? Really anyone who handles or has access to your money. If you went to a local insurance agent, most insurance agents will sell you what's called a position bond. In other words, you want to insure a position like the treasurer. and that's great. But if you insure the treasurer and the fundraising chairman or the president or somebody else runs off with money, then there's no coverage. So it's important to have what AIM offers, is we call it a blanket bond, and basically a blanket bond. You don't have to tell us the positions you want to insure. It just insures your money from anyone who has access to it or who might take it from you. So I want to talk about the fraud triangle. I want to talk a little bit about what we see with our bond claims. And unfortunately, used to be that general liability, the slips and falls, we pay $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 under the medical payments. That was our most frequent claim. But unfortunately today, our bond claims are our most frequent claims. And what typically happens, and I'm not picking on treasurers, but unfortunately it's usually a treasurer. Treasurer's a stay-at-home mom, is really involved with the school, involved with the PTA, and dad loses his job, and if they have any savings at all, within a month or two, they've gone through all their savings, and now the mortgage company has threatened to foreclose on the house. They're trying to figure out how to pay the electric bill and put some food on the table. And so the thought process is, well, I'm just going to borrow a little money from the PTA account, $3,000, make my mortgage payment, buy some groceries, pay the electric bill. And surely dad's going to get a job any day. We're going to take his first paycheck. We're going to deposit it in the PTA account. Everything's going to be great. Well, if this is what happened, then we wouldn't have any bond claims. But unfortunately, what happens is dad doesn't have a job after a month or 2 months or 3 months or 4 months. And so every month, they're borrowing $3,000 a month, and this usually goes on for 4 or 5 months. And so 5 months to $3,000, it adds up to $15,000. And so again, we call this a fraud triangle. And the reason we do is because in the lower part of the triangle, the motivation is they're in a desperate situation. They need money to pay their bills. Opportunity is we have access to the bank account, and the rationalization is we're not stealing money, we're borrowing money, and we're going to put it back. And unfortunately, it gets people into trouble. So how can the PTA protect itself from these type of losses? Well, the best thing that PTA can do is have someone who does not have check signing authority reviewing the bank statement on a monthly basis. So you want to get this person a copy of the bank statement and have that bank statement, have it go directly to them, have it unopened so they can open it. If that person knows that you had a $10,000 fundraiser, they can look at the bank statement and they're looking for a $10,000 deposit. If there's not a $10,000 deposit in that bank statement, then that's a red flag. They need to bring that up. If there's checks written in there to mortgage companies or to grocery stores, those are red flags, and those things need to be brought up. So this is the best checks and balance you can have to make sure that there's no funny business going on with your bank account. If you'll notice at the end of this sentence, it says required. The AIM insurance requires, and it's a typical requirement of most insurance companies, that this has to be done. If it's not done, and there's embezzlement, then there's no coverage for the PTA. The next one, which is required by the insurance, but is also required by your state leadership, is that you conduct an annual audit of your books by an audit committee or a qualified accounting person. Next, never take money home. Always have 2 people counting money and signing receipts. Never sign blank checks. Deposit money daily. Don't leave it laying around. Never pay bills with checks. Never with cash. And then this last one is really important because it's becoming more and more frequent. Is double verify email requests for money from PTA members. It's becoming very, very, very common for the treasurer to get an email from supposedly the president saying, I need you to send money immediately to a certain person. And that happens. And then we find out later that this person who's pretending to be the president is not really the president, and the treasurer sends money to someone who they shouldn't be sending money to. So be real careful about sending money when you get a request to do that, particularly when the person is indicating that you need to do that really fast. And just pick up the phone, call the president, and verify that email. Really simple thing to do. This is a really important point. How much bond coverage do you need? Each PTA is different, but our best practice is take and match your gross annual budget with your bond limit. So if your annual budget is 25,000, you need a 25,000 on a bond. If it's 50, you need a 50. A lot of PTAs will say, well, we never have more than $4,000 or $5,000 in our bank account. Why would we need 25 or $50,000 worth of coverage? Well, the fraud triangle is a perfect example. If you have $50,000 flowing through your bank account over throughout the year, then that gives somebody an opportunity to take $50,000 worth of money. So, the difference between a $10,000 bond and a $25,000 bond is about $20. So it's not really expensive to raise your limits and insure more money. So take a look at, call us, let us tell you, or take a look at your bond coverage, see what limits you have, and that doesn't match up with your budget. Please call us and talk to us about increasing your bond limit. We've had so many PTAs that had a $10,000 bond. They call us, they tell us they lost $18,000, and we're able to return $10,000, but they're out $8,000. So don't let that happen to you. And we've run out of time. I don't know if we have any questions or not, but I'll turn that over to.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think we
Welcome.
did we have a question, Christine?
Yes, actually, Amy did extend it to 7:05, and then she'll give us a 5-minute warning.
Okay, great.
So we get a little bit of time to chat. One of our members did ask, will these slides from your presentation be available for us to reference after the breakout session?
Yes, I can provide those to your state leadership and let them distribute those.
Thank you. That is the only question, unless you'd like to take any verbal questions now, or if anybody would like to put them in the chat.
And we did poll the group a little bit earlier when you got plucked out of the workshop, but about half of those in attendance do have insurance right now, so that's good.
That's great. Well, if you have any questions about what you have, please call us. Any questions about the coverages you might not have, and you want to visit with us as to whether you need to purchase those or not, or increase your limits, well, please call us.
There's a question from Eric.
Yeah, this isn't a question as much as what is your kind of best claim story that you have, or one of your favorite claim stories, maybe?
Oh, well, one of my most favorite claim story, and probably one of the most outrageous claim stories, is an officer's liability claim. We had a PTA that went to an owner of a little small piece of property in the neighborhood. That this small piece of property had just been sitting there for years and years and years, and didn't look like anybody was going to build a home on it or do anything with it. So the PTA went to the owner and said, if you'll donate this property to the city, we want to turn it into a playground for the kids in the neighborhood. So that's what happened. And about 6 months after the playground was completed, there was a lawsuit filed against the PTA, alleging that this playground had become detrimental to the community. And so once the attorneys got involved and they drilled down, what they found out was that this lawsuit had been filed by a group of senior citizens that were upset that the noise from this playground had interrupted their naps in the afternoon. So pretty crazy stuff. But again, here was a situation where no one got hurt on the playground, so there's no bodily injury. It's not a general liability claim, but it's an officer's liability claim because someone took exception with the decision that the officers of the PTA did that someone else didn't like.
Wow, that's a good one. I like that one. That's quite a story. I know I've gotten quite a few questions this year on all kinds of different things, from tending to city property and virtual headsets. But I'd love to hear if anybody else has questions. I think something came in chat.
Yes. So I have two questions. One is from Stacy from Rochester. She said, if our policy is up in October, but can we add it off cycle if we want to increase or add our insurance?
Yes. So what we'll do, if you want to add one of our policies, like say next week, if it's $100 policy, we'll prorate that from next week till October, which means it might be a $45 premium or a $50 premium. And we'll put the coverage in force, charge you the $45, $50. And then when when all the policies come up for renewal in October, then we'll charge you a full annual premium for all the coverages you have in place.
Thank you. I have another question. And I hope I said this right. Miquette from Woodbury. She said, when we renewed, I think there was an option to add optional terrorism coverage that could be added. Is this something a PTAs generally need or not? I think they said we probably didn't need it, but wanted to check.
Yeah.
A good
So
question.
in the past, terrorism coverage has been an option, but as PTAs renew their insurance, so if you're, in this case, if your insurance policy is coming up in October, as people renew, we're automatically going to add terrorism to your policy. But you really don't need it. I can't imagine a situation ever where there would be a terrorist act against a PTA carnival or any other kind of PTA activity. So I don't think you need it. I think it's very low risk, but the good news is whenever your policy renews, you'll automatically have that coverage.
I think we have time until 7:10, if I read that correct, Christine. If there's any other questions, we'd love to hear them.
I have a question. What is our best method of, when people sign off on the bank statements, just scanning those in and saving them? Or how do we record keep for this provision?
Yeah. So whoever's reviewing the bank statement, after they reviewed it, they just need to, sign off their name and put a date on it that they've reviewed it, and then that bank statement just needs to be kept in the treasurer's records.
Can it be electronic or does it have to be a paper copy?
Yeah, if you're not getting bank statements, then we suggest that you go online and download it, print it off, and then sign it and give it to the treasurer.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question I sometimes get about that is, do you want the treasurer to initial those or somebody who's maybe not on the board, or what's your recommendation?
Yeah, we don't need the treasurer to sign off. We just need someone who's not a check signer to sign off saying that they've looked at it, because we find that if everybody knows there's a second pair of eyes looking at the bank statement on a monthly basis, then people are less tempted to get sticky fingers. And unfortunately, when we get a call from a PTA and they say we need to file an embezzlement claim, we've discovered that somebody's been taking money monthly for 3 years. Well, immediately a red flag goes up and we go, well, if somebody's been taking money for 3 years, there's probably not been an annual audit. And obviously nobody's probably looking at the bank statements every month. And so when we have a long-term loss, typically that we know, or we find out that there's nobody looking at bank statements, there's not been an audit.
Now, does AIM require having that financial review or that audit done every year as part of the claims process?
Yes, as part of the claims process, we do require that there's an annual audit every year. No different than what the state requires you to do, your state PTA.
I have a question from, is it Miquette? I hope I'm getting it right one time. For the annual audit, when you saw a qualified accounting person, can that just be someone that understands accounting or have to have credentials?
Yeah, when I say qualified, just somebody who has accounting understanding, bookkeeping understanding.
Awesome.
And we do, what's great is for my PTA in Rochester, we actually have all of the officers take a look. We have an executive board meeting to approve the budget and look at the bank statements and just kind of do an annual report on all of our items going forward. And then we present it to in our next general meeting.
Thank you for all your questions. Thank you, Mr. Allen, for joining us. I think we're coming to the end of our session at this time. But we appreciate all that input, and just make sure you tell everybody, how they can contact you. I always send everybody to you when I get those questions, because I know that your service reps are the best in the world to work with, and they always have answers to our questions. So.
Well, I'll share my screen one last time, and you can see our 800 number and then our email address, where you can either call us or email us with questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you.
Lots of good questions.
Yep, it was great.